Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, my name's Alessandro Crolla of the Starter Quest podcast, where you can normally hear me teaching the classics of video games to my newbie partner Jen, teaching her about the games and what made them huge. I came here though to do something a little different, and instead spend some time gushing over the Phoenix Wright series, and explain how the third game, Phoenix Wright Trials and Tribulations, saved my love for a whole genre of gaming. As a kid, I was a huge fan of adventure games. It's no mistake that the second episode of my podcast was about The Secret of Monkey Island. When people think of classic video games, it's a shame that most people default to things like Mario or Pac-Man. Great games, of course, but it's the games like Broken Sword and Indiana Jones and the Secret of Atlantis, which I have much fonder memories about than the platformers or the shooters. These are the games I came away from feeling smarter for solving the puzzles, even if I had to resort to cheesing the puzzle through trying every item until one of them worked. Sadly, these type of games were on the wane coming into the late 90s and fell out of favour. And I got to my teens looking back on the adventure genre a little cynically. As I got into understanding what makes compelling gameplay, I had this thought that adventure games were all story and little mechanics. Sure, Discworld was funny, and Myst was visually amazing, at least back then. But the gameplay was so boilerplate, with all the operating fun of an Excel spreadsheet. In that pathetic teenage way I can only hope to God we all empathise with, I had convinced myself that was why adventure games died a death in the 2000s. If you ask me now, thinking back to when I was browsing an independent game store which sold American imports, I couldn't tell you why on earth I picked up the first Ace Attorney game. I was going through my hardcore anime phase in my late teens, so I'm guessing the cover with the anime characters on it was probably the main influence. But this is also after I got my hands on another Code 2 Memories, which did offer some fun hardware gimmicks for the DS. It left me a lot more receptive to playing games on my new handheld. Either way, I played through Phoenix Wright and had a damn good time. I'd heard of visual novels but hadn't gone into one before, so combining that with the mystery element had me genuinely impressed. Enough to import the next game, Phoenix Wright Justice for All, as soon as it came out. This one, however, left a very lukewarm taste in my mouth because there was very little change to the mechanics compared to the first one. So when it came around to the third game, Phoenix Wright Trials and Tribulations, I still bought a copy, but less of excitement and more of, it gives me something to do during my lunch breaks. I didn't just play it during my lunch breaks though. It started there, but as I progressed more and more into this game, it engrossed me in a way that the other two had not before. Just to get everyone onto the same page, each game of Phoenix Wright is divided up into 4 or 5 cases. You are hired to defend a different client each time against a murder charge to which they plead innocence. From there, the gameplay of each case is broken up into 2 further phases. The investigation phase, where you interview people related to the case and search around the crime scenes for clues. And the trial phase, where you put everything you know and found up against the people on the stand, seeing how what they say stacks up against the evidence. You find the contradictions in the witness testimony by comparing their claims against the ever-growing list of weird inventory items you're carrying around, while our hero blurts out "Objection!" in a manner which gets less silly the more you hear it. The trial usually takes 3 in-game days, so you get a few instances of each phase per case. Each case usually ends by getting the true culprit on the witness stand, and proving that they did the dirty so you could exonerate your client. We'll get a few added mechanics from game to game, but for the most part, this style of gameplay is exactly how the series still plays today. So Phoenix Wright 3 also wasn't wowing me with something new mechanically, no, but this game still gripped me. In the previous game's defense, I do get that having a new mystery to solve is already enough of a hook to play each entry. But what also disappointed me with 2 was how dull the story of the game was to play. It's not bad, but it's definitely a lot smaller than what you got with Phoenix Wright 1. But it did introduce us to our first ever change in the main antagonist. By changing the prosecutor from our previous rival and best friend Miles Edgeworth, it's complicated, to Miles' adoptive sister Franziska von Karma. But none of the cases stuck with me, and it definitely felt a little on the flat side when comparing to the first game. This might sound like a purely personal opinion, though from what I can gather it feels like the developers are on the same page as me, as they decided to do something different for the third game. Phoenix Wright, Trials and Tribulations was packed to bursting with a story which tried to do as much as it can with an established formula. This was the first game which had us play as different protagonists. We not only play the eponymous Phoenix Wright for 3 of the cases, but we get to play 2 flashback episodes as Phoenix mentor Mia Fey, who defends a younger Phoenix Wright from his own murder accusation. This was quite the twist for players like me, who until now had only ever seen the game from Phoenix's perspective. Mia has been a constant companion throughout the franchise so far, despite the minor inconvenience of dying in the second case of the first game. Thanks to Mia's little sister Maya and their cousin Pearl both having the power to channel the spirits of dead people, they both have been transforming into Mia in times of desperation to help her deliver some nugget of wisdom, usually to help Phoenix and in turn the player realize a change in a previous assumption to turn the case around. Getting to player did change Mia for me, from being this amazing mentor who will help nudge any blockage of thinking, to being much more relatable, struggling through her case in the same way Phoenix does, trying to solve an admittedly easy trial for the sake of a canon where Phoenix Wright grows up to become the main character. You get to see why Phoenix was so inspired by Mia. The wisdom she gives Phoenix to always trust your client is not something that he simply picked up from her, but he had experienced directly as a defendant of her. It really helps you understand why Phoenix looks up to Mia. Though if that wasn't enough, I was also grinning from ear to ear as I realised we were about to enjoy one sole investigation and trial phase as Miles Edgeworth, who steps in for an incapacitated Phoenix during the start of the last case. After 2 games of watching this beautiful bromance that grew as Miles and Edgeworth battled in court, Edgeworth getting to enjoy his own moment to defend a client against that adoptive sister I mentioned earlier was just the right side of fan service. I was genuinely bummed when we have to hand the protagonist reins back to Phoenix later in the case. Mechanically, neither Mia nor Miles really give us anything different to do in the game. Both interact with the visual world the exact way the Phoenix Wright does. But what stuck with me was that we were getting something we couldn't get when we just play as Phoenix. Perspective. Fighting Edgeworth and looking up to Mia didn't make me understand either of them as well as I do when I get to be them. Seeing how they approach a case through their own inner dialogue, which we now get to be privy to through their first-person narrative to the story. We get to see how Mia handled being a rookie just as Phoenix did in the first game. Seeing her execute the exact same mantra she always gives us about trusting your client that she told us in the earlier games. We get to see the amusing hands-on example of the friendship Edgeworth has with the slightly incompetent lead detective with heart of gold Dick Gumshoe as they investigate the crime scene together. Seeing how Edgeworth and Gumshoe have the same energy that Phoenix and Maya have when they're investigating cases helps you understand that this man who likes to consider himself a loner in Edgeworth has the exact same support network around him whether he wants it or not. For this is what the third game did, which puts it ahead of the other games in the Ace Attorney series. Deliver on story which presses each case to new areas. One case starts as a larceny accusation, which turns into a murder accusation which is linked to the larceny. Another case has you defending a client who's already got a guilty verdict through Phoenix's incompetent defending, despite the slight hiccup that Phoenix had nothing to do with the original case, and is now chasing an imposter while trying to get a retrial for this client. And of course, I can't talk about Trials and Tribulations without mentioning its 2 antagonists. To fully explore the new ideas of this story, we get 2 constant pressures that carry from episode to episode. The mass-murdering Delia Hawthorne, who's linked to multiple cases throughout this adventure, and the mysterious face-visored prosecutor Godot. a man who cites a grudge against Phoenix Wright, which has brought him back into the courtroom to defeat him. There's admittedly a little too much backwards writing to the pair of them to justify their stance as the final villains to this trilogy. But that fault aside, they are exactly what the story needs to tie everything together. They give this drama the right level of mystery and intensity that make you want to learn everything. Our minds constantly racing one step ahead of the story as it reveals all the cards, and occasionally being trumped by a surprise to our expectations. Also, total aside, but definitely needs brought up, Godot's theme in the soundtrack is a wonderful piece of chiptune jazz, which deserves to be remembered in the annals of gaming music. Take all this together: the multiple protagonists, the compelling adversaries, fresh ways to approach each case, and we get a game which does nothing new mechanically, yet stands head above the rest as the best Phoenix Wright game to play. Telling the story using tools we have seen them use before, but truly pressed to their maximum to find a way to excite the player. It helped me realise how immature I was being by saying adventure games were somehow lesser for focusing on their story. Novelty is wonderful, but video games will always serve as one of the best mediums for experiencing story in a way that no other entertainment style can. We play these people, we live their experiences, we share their triumphs, and we claim their shame. When we want to experience the guilt of just doing our jobs, we can play Papers, Please. When we feel alone and want a game to remind us of the power of connection, we can play Journey. And when we want to play a game which makes us feel like legal eagles, doing everything we can to defend an innocent person based on trust, we can play Phoenix Wright. A huge thank you goes out to Matt and Jeff for letting me come on and share these weird thoughts on my mind. And, as always, happy gaming.
Man, that movie was excellent.
It really was. Totally blew my expectations away.
I know, right? Now I really want to tell everyone about it. But I'm not sure how.
Yeah. If only there was a podcast dedicated to reviewing films and discussing the latest news and trailers on upcoming films. That would be nice.
Yes, for sure. And we can call it The Cineguy Show.
What? No. It will be called Real Movie Critic Unleashed.
No. How about Cineguy featuring Real Movie Critic?
How about the Real Movie Critic and his sidekick, the Cineguy?
CG and RMC.
RMC and CG!
The Real Movie Critic versus the Cineguy. Only at CertainPOV.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're going down, critic.
Bring it on, guy.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.